And in the 2025 offseason, the San Francisco 49ers made the most unambiguous statement a franchise can make. They signed Fred Warner to a 3-year contract extension worth $63 million, $56.7 million of it guaranteed, the highest paid linebacker in NFL history. Again, the second time in 4 years, an average annual value of $21 million for a player who had just turned 28 and was entering the heart of his prime. The kind of investment you make when you believe a player's best football is still ahead of him. Kyle Shanahan put it with the casual certainty of someone who has stopped needing to convince anyone. Fred's having a hell of a year so far, but I can't think of a year he hasn't though. Not one year in his career, not a down year, not a plateau, not a stretch where opposing offenses figured him out. 7+ seasons of consistent elite play across multiple defensive coordinators, from Robert Saleh, who first trusted a rookie with the green dot and the command of a defense, to DeMeco Ryans, who elevated that same foundation into something even more sophisticated across different supporting casts and different team circumstances. The one constant on a defense that is rebuilt around him. Consider what his peers actually say about what they see. Sauce Gardner, one of the best cornerbacks in football, a man whose entire career is built around understanding coverage. Put it plainly, Fred Warner is really a DB playing LB. His longtime 49er teammate Jimmy Ward, who has played alongside him in the secondary for years and knows exactly what elite coverage looks like from behind it, was more direct still. He's the best covering linebacker in ball. And then there's Rodgers. After that January 2022 divisional round game in the snow at Green Bay, after the 49ers eliminated the Packers and Rodgers walked across the field in defeat, he sought Warner out. He didn't have to. He went looking for him. Wired for sound, completely unprompted, he said what only true peers ever say. "I'm happy for you, man. I really mean that. Unfortunately, name recognition means too much. Ain't nobody better. There really isn't. You're the best, and everybody knows it." A Hall of Fame quarterback in the tunnel after a playoff loss, walking up to a linebacker who had just beaten him, saying, "You're the best. Everybody knows it." There is a line that runs from a 7-year-old in San Marcos picking up a football for the first time because his mother needed him to have a community, all the way to that tunnel in Green Bay. Through the house where Spanish was spoken at the table, through the church congregation that connected his film to the right coach, through the draft where 69 picks went before his name, through the training camp where he won the starting job by simply outperforming everyone around him, through the Super Bowl heartbreak, through the contracts and the accolades and the seasons where he was the most complete linebacker in the sport. It all runs back to one thing: Laura Warner telling her son, in word, in sacrifice, in daily example, what hard work looks like. He learned it, he built a career on it, and in doing so, he became the prototype that modern teams dream of finding. A linebacker built for an era that had supposedly made his position obsolete. Fred Warner didn't invent the modern coverage linebacker. Luke Kuechly had already shown what elite coverage from the inside looked like. Bobby Wagner, the player Warner himself cited as a model for his game, had spent years setting the standard at the position. Levante David, Patrick Willis, the evolution had been building for a decade. But Warner arrived at a moment when that evolution was at a crossroads. The passing game had accelerated beyond what most defenses could handle. Tight ends like Travis Kelce and George Kittle were doing things that exposed linebackers who had been built for a different era. Teams were quietly phasing the position out, shrinking their linebacker rooms, replacing them with defensive backs. The conventional wisdom was pointing toward the linebacker's eventual obsolescence, and Fred Warner made that argument impossible to make. He showed, consistently, across 7+ seasons, against the best quarterbacks and the best offensive concepts the league could produce, that you could have all of it in one player. The elite coverage that matches up with tight ends and running backs in space, the tackling and run-stopping physicality, the pre-snap intelligence to be the quarterback of the defense. He didn't compromise one skill for another. He refined all of them simultaneously, until he became one of the most complete linebackers of his era. The Warner household was a blended thing, culturally, linguistically, historically. Laura's family was Mexican-American, and that heritage ran deep in the house. Spanish was spoken at the kitchen table. Traditions were kept alive that stretched back generations. Even though Laura's own father, Fred's grandfather, had passed away when Laura was still a small girl, Fred felt that heritage anyway, through his mother's commitment to holding on to something that could have been lost. Years later, Fred Warner would carry a Mexican flag onto NFL fields. He would talk about it directly, simply, with the kind of honesty that only comes from someone who isn't performing their identity for anyone. Unfortunately, my mom's Mexican father died when she was still a small child. However, that Mexican part of my family has always been active in my life. In my home, Spanish was always spoken. So, yes, it has played a role in my life. He didn't say it to build a brand. He said it because it's true. From his father's side came African American and Panamanian roots, a richly layered heritage that expressed itself in a child who was different, who moved differently, thought differently, carried himself with a quiet confidence that coaches would eventually describe as unusual for a teenager. Fred would not grow up with his father in the house, but who he was at his core was shaped by both sides of that background, and he has never been shy about carrying all of it. Football found Fred when he was 7 years old. His mother has said, and Fred has echoed it, that the sport did something that a single parent can't always engineer for a child alone. It gave him a community at exactly the moment a boy needs one. There is a kind of belonging that comes from a team, from the shared language of a huddle, the ritual of practice, the accountability of playing for the guy lined up next to you. That's different from anything a family dinner can provide. Football gave Fred Warner a tribe when he needed one most. He wasn't a prodigy right out of the gate, not in the loud, unmistakable way that sends scouts running for their clipboards when a kid is still in middle school. What Fred had was quieter. He watched the game differently than the noticed that he was always one step ahead of where the play was going, not because he was faster, but because he saw things earlier. He was the kind of kid who would replay a Tuesday practice in his head on Wednesday morning and come back Thursday with the correction already made. By the time he reached his early teens, Fred Warner was already doing something unusual, thinking deliberately about the NFL. Not the casual, poster-on-the-wall kind of dreaming, but the calculated, intentional kind. He studied San Diego Chargers games. He watched how linebackers moved in coverage. He filed away what worked and what got exposed. He was building a mental library before he had the physical tools to justify it. The church congregation at their meeting house gave the Warner family something that went beyond faith. It gave them a network, a community of people who knew each other, looked out for each other, and took seriously the idea that a kid's future was worth investing in. Fred mentioned his ambitions openly in that congregation, the way a teenager does when he's trying to make a thing feel real by saying it out loud. He wanted to play college football, maybe the NFL someday. Most people nodded politely. Bless his heart. One member of the congregation, a devoted BYU fan, decided to do more than nod, but that comes later. For now, what matters is this. In a house in San Marcos, California, a single mother was raising a son who was quietly accumulating everything: the work ethic, the football intelligence, the cultural identity, the hunger that he would one day need to become one of the best defenders in the world. He just didn't know it yet. When Fred Warner arrived at Mission Hills High School in San Marcos, he was a linebacker who had to earn everything. He didn't walk in with a recruiting reputation. He started as a player with a frame and an IQ, and he worked, relentlessly, methodically, until the frame filled out and the IQ became undeniable. By his junior year, something was obvious to anyone watching. Fred Warner moved differently than linebackers his age. He could drop into coverage and stay with running backs through the flat. He could diagnose a route combination before the receiver broke out of his stance. And when he arrived at the point of attack, he was physical in ways that made blockers uncomfortable. He became a starter, then a problem for opposing offenses, then a name.
Fred was a 3-star prospect. He had interest from Arizona State and USC among others, but the Power 5 programs were not exactly lining up at the door. The big machine had not fully noticed him. Then the tape reached Kelly Poppinga. A BYU alum in Fred's church congregation helped connect his film to the Cougars coaching staff. Poppinga, a linebackers coach at BYU who had just watched Kyle Van Noy, his prize prospect, head to the NFL, watched Fred's highlights, and scheduled a visit. Fred signed with BYU in February of 2014. When he showed up in Provo as a true freshman that fall, still developing physically, he recorded 24 tackles, a tackle for loss, and an interception return for a touchdown. Not bad for a prospect that most programs had overlooked. By his junior year at BYU, Warner had grown into something that coaches and scouts were struggling to properly categorize. New head coach Kalani Sitake recognized the problem and the gift and moved Fred into a hybrid linebacker safety role, lining him up in space, asking him to do things most linebackers can't do. The reasoning, in Sitake's own words, was simple. He's a big kid, but he can run. In October 2016, against Boise State in a game BYU desperately needed, Fred Warner intercepted a pass and tightrope the sideline for a touchdown. One of those plays where the whole stadium feels the shift in momentum. BYU won. Warner's stock climbed. By graduation in December 2017, he had finished with 264 career tackles, 32 tackles for loss, 6.5 sacks, and 7 interceptions. He was team captain. He won the BYU MVP award. He accepted an invitation to the Senior Bowl, where a full week of practice in front of NFL scouts lifted his profile significantly. At the NFL Combine, he posted a 4.64 40-yard dash and a 38.5-inch vertical. For a linebacker, the numbers said one thing, but the projections said another, and that, the gap between what Fred Warner was and what the NFL thought he was about to become the central conflict of his story. On the night of April 27, 2018, 69 names were called before Fred Warner's, 69 picks, 2 full rounds and change, men who were considered better prospects, better fits, more certain bets. And there is nothing in Fred Warner's story that suggests he carried bitterness about that, but there is everything in his story that suggests he remembered it. The San Francisco 49ers selected him 71st overall in the 3rd round. He was the 9th linebacker taken, 9 linebackers before him, which, in a position group where teams typically carry fewer than 5, means the NFL had effectively communicated its collective opinion of Fred Warner before he took a single professional snap. The noise around his selection was modest. A BYU guy, good tape, 3rd round athleticism, developmental, the kind of language that gets used for players who fill a roster and disappear inside 3 years. The scouting reports acknowledged his coverage ability, his athleticism, his football IQ. Then they flagged the concerns. Experience against smaller school competition, projection risk at a new position. The NFL has a very specific way of dampening enthusiasm for players it isn't sure about. Fred Warner arrived in the NFL dampened. Laura was right next to him when his name was finally called. He looked over at her. She got the first hug. The room around them reacted the way rooms react to 3rd round picks. Adequately. Politely, with none of the electricity that surrounds the names called earlier in the night. But there was something the projections couldn't capture, because there is no metric for it. Fred Warner was about to be handed an opportunity nobody saw coming, and he was already prepared for it. The challenge was that arriving in Santa Clara, California at 21 years old meant walking into a completely foreign role. At BYU, Warner was an outside linebacker. He lined up wide, covered receivers across the field, used his athleticism and instincts in space. The San Francisco 49ers wanted him at Mike linebacker, middle linebacker, the quarterback of the defense, the player who relays calls, aligns his teammates, commands the unit, and makes every pre-snap decision the defense runs through. The sheer volume of information required to play middle linebacker in a Kyle Shanahan defense is staggering. This isn't a system where you react to the play in front of you. You need to know the formation, the down, the distance, the tendencies, the backfield alignment, the receiver splits, and you need to know all of it before the snap so you can communicate it to 10 other people. Most rookies at the position take 2 or 3 seasons just to develop that baseline. Fred Warner apparently needed considerably fewer. In training camp that summer, he competed for the starting job, and he won it on merit through consistent performance that convinced the coaching staff he was ready. Fred Warner did not get the job because someone else failed. He got it because he was better. He carried his iPad everywhere that summer. To meals, to the team hotel, into the training room while sitting in the Normatec compression boots. He watched film the way some people watch television, compulsively, hungrily, searching for pattern and detail in every frame. He told reporters he was a visual learner, that walkthroughs were accelerating his understanding faster than any playbook could. His coaches noticed he was asking different kinds of questions than most rookies. Not, what am I supposed to do here? But why does this work when the offense aligns this way? Defensive coordinator Robert Saleh, the man who would eventually build a reputation as one of the most respected defensive coaches in football, trusted a 21-year-old rookie to be the quarterback of his defense. Not a veteran who'd been in the system for years. a rookie. Saleh made that call because he saw what Warner's coaches had always seen, a player whose football intelligence had already outgrown his experience level. Head coach Kyle Shanahan noticed all of it. "He's very smart," Shanahan said that June. "He doesn't make the same mistake twice." That is a remarkable thing to say about a 21-year-old still learning a new position. And it captures something essential about Fred Warner that no combine number ever could. When asked about his goals as he competed for the starting role, Warner gave the answer that defines his entire approach. "I am not worried about, hey, I need to be a starter. I am worried about, I need to control what I can control. And that's being the best me. If I am doing that and I am playing better than whoever is in front of me, it's an easy pick." He went home to San Marcos that summer. Laura was right next to him on draft night. She got the first hug, and she reminded him, the way she always had, what the next part looked like. You put your head down, you work, you earn it. On September 9th, 2018, the San Francisco 49ers opened their regular season against the Minnesota Vikings. Standing in the middle of their defense, wearing number 54, was the 9th linebacker taken in the draft, the kid who had just won the starting job in training camp and was about to show the world he deserved it. The question wasn't whether he was ready. The question was how ready. What happened in that first game against the Vikings was not a stumble, not a flash of promise wrapped in growing pains. 12 combined tackles, 11 of them solo, a pass defensed, from a rookie, in his first start at a position he had learned on the job over a single training camp. He was the first 49ers rookie since the year 2000 to begin his career with 4 consecutive games of at least 10 tackles. Let that number sit for a second. Not one game, not 2, 4 in a row, in the most physically demanding league on the planet, at a position he was still learning from the ground up. Fred Warner was not supposed to be this ready. He was. Kyle Shanahan would later pull film from that Minnesota game and show it to younger players as a lesson in development. He had no dreads. He was wearing number 48. He had no swag, Shanahan remembered. It did not look like totally Fred Warner. The point wasn't the performance. The point was the growth. The version of Fred Warner who walked off that field in Minnesota was already good. What came next was something else entirely. The 2019 season was when the rest of the NFL had to start paying attention. In Week 10 against the Seattle Seahawks on Monday Night Football, Warner finished with 10 tackles, sacked Russell Wilson twice, and forced a fumble that turned into a 49ers touchdown. 2 weeks later, he strip-sacked Aaron Rodgers in a 37-8 demolition of the Green Bay Packers. He earned NFC Defensive Player of the Week, then NFC Defensive Player of the Month for November. In Week 16 against the Rams, he picked off Jared Goff and returned it 46 yards into the end zone, his first career NFL touchdown, in a narrow 34-31 win. The 49ers finished the regular season 13-3. They were a machine, and Fred Warner was the signal caller in the middle of their defense. The NFC Championship game came in January 2020 at Levi's Stadium, in front of a crowd that had been waiting years for something like this. The Green Bay Packers with Aaron Rodgers. The 49ers with Fred Warner. It wasn't close. San Francisco won 37-20. And Warner was everywhere, a presence on every significant defensive play, communicating, commanding, making it look like middle linebacker was the only position he'd ever played. Super Bowl 54 was next. Hard Rock Stadium, Miami, Florida, February 2nd, 2020. The Kansas City Chiefs were favored. Patrick Mahomes, in just his second year as a starter, was already being compared to the all-time greats. The San Francisco 49ers, 13-3 in the regular season, were not intimidated. For the better part of 3 quarters, the 49ers defense made Mahomes uncomfortable. Warner and Robert Saleh's unit controlled the middle of the field, limited Kansas City's explosive plays, and helped San Francisco carry a 13-10 lead into the 4th quarter of the Super Bowl. With 15 minutes left, the Lombardi Trophy was within reach. Then the Chiefs found what they needed. Mahomes, rattled, pressured, limited for most of the night, caught fire in the final quarter. 21 unanswered points, 3 touchdowns in 7 minutes. The kind of sustained brilliance that only the best quarterbacks can summon when the moment is at its biggest. The final score was 31-20, Kansas City. Fred Warner walked off the field in Miami at 23 years old, having just played on the biggest stage in professional sports and come heartbreakingly short. It was the kind of loss that doesn't fade quickly, not because of a mistake, not because the defense collapsed, but because the margin between winning and losing in this sport is sometimes just one quarterback in one quarter deciding that he's done losing. The 2020 season, played in the strange, condensed reality of a world mid-pandemic, was Fred Warner's first genuine claim to individual greatness. 118 tackles, 2 interceptions, a sack, 6 passes defended, a forced fumble. According to Next Gen Stats, he was the only linebacker ranked among the top coverage defenders in the entire NFL that season.
A list otherwise populated entirely by defensive backs, cornerbacks, safeties, the players specifically designed for the job Fred was doing at an elite level. When asked to model his game after someone, Warner had pointed to Bobby Wagner and Luke Kuechly, two of the best middle linebackers of the previous decade. The student was becoming the standard. His first Pro Bowl selection came that year. His first-team All-Pro honor followed. Around the league, the conversation about what a linebacker was supposed to be had a new reference point. And then, on July 21st, 2021, the San Francisco 49ers made history. Fred Warner signed a 5-year contract extension worth $95 million, with $40.5 million guaranteed, the highest paid linebacker in NFL history. The kid from San Marcos, California, the one who got his scholarship because someone in his church congregation connected his film to the right coach, was now the financial and symbolic anchor of his entire position. Kyle Shanahan said out loud what everyone in the building already knew. We all know Fred is going to be a Hall of Famer. The only thing still missing was a ring, and the person standing between Fred Warner and that ring was about to become a recurring theme. You have to understand the feeling of that fourth quarter in Miami. The San Francisco 49ers were leading the Kansas City Chiefs 13-10, going into the final 15 minutes of the biggest game in the world. The defense had controlled Patrick Mahomes for 3 quarters. Warner and Robert Saleh's unit had done the job. The offense had done its part. Every arrow pointed the same direction. Then, in the span of about 7 minutes of professional football, it all inverted. The Chiefs scored 21 unanswered points. Mahomes, who had been limited and uncomfortable for most of the night, found his receivers. Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce. He found the rhythm that had been missing all evening and couldn't be stopped once it arrived. The final score, Kansas City 31, San Francisco 20. Fred Warner walked off the field in Miami without a ring. He was 23 years old, and the team he played on had led the Super Bowl going into the fourth quarter. That is not a failure of preparation. That is the cruelty of the sport at its most concentrated. The most painful losses in football aren't the ones where you get outplayed. The most painful ones are the ones where you had it, where the moment was yours, and then it wasn't. For a player who had performed at the highest level in the biggest game, the walk to the locker room must have felt impossibly long. But Fred Warner does not fold. He went back to work. The 2020 season produced his first All-Pro. The 2021 contract reset the market. The 2022 season brought his second first-team All-Pro with 118 tackles, 2 sacks, 10 passes defended. And in January 2022, in the divisional round against the Packers, in the snow at Lambeau Field, with Aaron Rodgers on the other side, Warner and the 49ers pulled off one of the most memorable playoff upsets of recent years. After the game, Aaron Rodgers, the man who'd been on the other side of that defense all afternoon, sought Warner out on the field. He was wired for sound. And what Rodgers said, completely unprompted, tells you everything the league actually thought about Fred Warner at that moment. I'm happy for you, man. I really mean that. Unfortunately, name recognition means too much. Ain't nobody better. There really isn't. You're the best. And everybody knows it. A Hall of Fame quarterback walking up to a linebacker, saying, "You're the best." But the Chiefs were always there. February 11th, 2024, Super Bowl LVIII, Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas. The San Francisco 49ers against the Kansas City Chiefs, again. Fred Warner took the field in Las Vegas as a fully formed defensive force. Not the hungry 23-year-old of Super Bowl 54, but a seasoned veteran who had constructed through obsessive film work a mental model of the game that most players never reach. He was 27 years old. He was approaching his absolute prime. He showed all of it. 13 tackles, the most by any player on the field that night. He was everywhere on that defense. And yet, the 49ers built a 10-point lead. With a lead like that, in the Super Bowl, you begin to do the math, to sketch out the final score in your head, to feel the weight of what's coming. Fans in San Francisco Reds started to believe. And then, again, Patrick Mahomes said no. The Chiefs came back. The game tied at 22. It went to overtime. And in overtime, Kansas City engineered the game-winning drive and scored. 25-22. Final. 2 Super Bowls, 2 losses, both to the same team. Both times with a lead on the board. Fred Warner, the best linebacker many of his peers had ever faced, had played 2 of the biggest defensive games of his career in the 2 biggest moments of his career, and still came away without a ring. In the quiet aftermath of Super Bowl LVIII, the question that circled the conversation was the most unfair thing sports asks of great players. Was the ring ever going to come? He was approaching his late 20s. The window, as it always does, would eventually close. The San Francisco 49ers had done everything right. had assembled a roster that should have won it and still couldn't get that last game. The silence in that Las Vegas locker room was the loudest answer anyone gave. Here is what nobody ever got to take from Fred Warner, no matter how those Super Bowl nights ended: the respect of his peers. Not a formal designation, not an engraved ring. The thing that matters more: the daily, unvoted consensus of the men who face him every week. Because regardless of how the biggest games ended, many players and coaches considered him the best linebacker in football, and few seriously argued otherwise. After Super Bowl LVIII, there was a version of this story where a player of Warner's profile begins to waver, where the weight of 2 losses to the same team, both times with a lead in hand, starts to feel like something more than bad luck, where the questions from the outside begin to get inside. But that is not Fred Warner. Fred Warner goes back to work. He came back in the 2024 season and did exactly what he had done in every prior season of his career. In the film room before the sun came up, on the practice field making the correction the same day he made the mistake, in the game reading route combinations before receivers had broken from their stance. His teammates watched and spoke about it in the understated way that athletes describe things they see every day but haven't fully normalized. This is just what Fred does. He was named first team All-Pro for the 4th time in his career: 2020, 2022, 2023, 2024. 4 selections in 5 seasons. In the history of the linebacker position, you can count on one hand the players who have sustained that level of individual recognition. He was voted to his 4th Pro Bowl. He was ranked 11th overall on the NFL Top 100 Players list, voted on by the players themselves, by the men who line up across from him on Sundays and understand better than any analyst what he's actually worth. In Week 5 of the 2023 season against the Dallas Cowboys, the kind of nationally visible game where a player can establish something in front of the whole country, Warner was unstoppable. 8 solo tackles, a sack on Dak Prescott, an interception, a forced fumble on running back Tony Pollard. The 49ers won 42-10. One player, one game, every skill the position demands displayed in a single afternoon. In the locker room afterward, George Kittle, one of the great tight ends in NFL history, a man who has faced the best linebackers in the league for years, was clear about what he had just witnessed. His own teammate was the best linebacker in football. And in the 2025 offseason, the San Francisco 49ers made the most unambiguous statement a franchise can make. They signed Fred Warner to a 3-year contract extension worth $63 million, $56.7 million of it guaranteed, the highest paid linebacker in NFL history. Again, the second time in 4 years, an average annual value of $21 million for a player who had just turned 28 and was entering the heart of his prime. The kind of investment you make when you believe a player's best football is still ahead of him. Kyle Shanahan put it with the casual certainty of someone who has stopped needing to convince anyone. Fred's having a hell of a year so far, but I can't think of a year he hasn't though. Not one year in his career, not a down year, not a plateau, not a stretch where opposing offenses figured him out. 7+ seasons of consistent elite play across multiple defensive coordinators, from Robert Saleh, who first trusted a rookie with the green dot and the command of a defense, to DeMeco Ryans, who elevated that same foundation into something even more sophisticated, across different supporting casts and different team circumstances. The one constant on a defense that is rebuilt around him. Consider what his peers actually say about what they see. Sauce Gardner, one of the best cornerbacks in football, a man whose entire career is built around understanding coverage. Put it plainly, Fred Warner is really a DB playing LB. His longtime 49er teammate Jimmy Ward, who has played alongside him in the secondary for years and knows exactly what elite coverage looks like from behind it, was more direct still. He's the best covering linebacker in ball. And then there's Rodgers. After that January 2022 divisional round game in the snow at Green Bay, after the 49ers eliminated the Packers and Rodgers walked across the field in defeat, he sought Warner out. He didn't have to. He went looking for him. Wired for sound, completely unprompted. He said what only true peers ever say. I'm happy for you, man. I really mean that. Unfortunately, name recognition means too much. Ain't nobody better. There really isn't. You're the best, and everybody knows it. A Hall of Fame quarterback in the tunnel after a playoff loss, walking up to a linebacker who had just beaten him, saying, "You're the best. Everybody knows it." There is a line that runs from a 7-year-old in San Marcos picking up a football for the first time because his mother needed him to have a community, all the way to that tunnel in Green Bay. through the house where Spanish was spoken at the table, through the church congregation that connected his film to the right coach, through the draft where 69 picks went before his name, through the training camp where he won the starting job by simply outperforming everyone around him, through the Super Bowl heartbreak, through the contracts and the accolades and the seasons where he was the most complete linebacker in the sport. It all runs back to one thing: Laura Warner telling her son, in word, in sacrifice, in daily example, what hard work looks like. He learned it. He built a career on it. And in doing so, he became the prototype that modern teams dream of finding, a linebacker built for an era that had supposedly made his position obsolete. Fred Warner didn't invent the modern coverage linebacker. Luke Kuechly had already shown what elite coverage from the inside looked like. Bobby Wagner, the player Warner himself cited as a model for his game, had spent years setting the standard at the position. Levante David, Patrick Willis, the evolution had been building for a decade. But Warner arrived at a moment when that evolution was at a crossroads. The passing game had accelerated beyond what most defenses could handle. Tight ends like Travis Kelce and George Kittle were doing things that exposed linebackers who had been built for a different era. Teams were quietly phasing the position out, shrinking their linebacker rooms, replacing them with defensive backs. The conventional wisdom was pointing toward the linebacker's eventual obsolescence, and Fred Warner made that argument impossible to make. He showed, consistently, across 7+ seasons, against the best quarterbacks and the best offensive concepts the league could produce, that you could have all of it in one player. The elite coverage that matches up with tight ends and running backs in space, the tackling and run-stopping physicality, the pre-snap intelligence to be the quarterback of the defense. He didn't compromise one skill for another. He refined all of them simultaneously until he became one of the most complete linebackers of his era.